$11 million a year into the Illinois Zephyr, our own citizens' money. The Illinois Zephyr generates $5 million approximately in ridership. So we're kicking in another $11 million. We have got to be able to show people that we are putting the squeeze on, that we're lobbying very, very vigorously with about what kind of economic development this is going to produce. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you so much for coming all the way from Dubuque. Would you like to say a few words?
Dave Solberg, and it's good to be here. We have been meeting in Dubuque several years ago. A community-wide envisioning process started out with 2,000 or 3,000 ideas, and coming out of those as one of the top 10 was a passenger rail connection to Dubuque. And we have been collecting signatures and support for this idea for the past years. We were very excited a few years ago when we were hopeful that it would be in the near future, but we look forward to the time. We think we've got more to offer in terms of student connections as well as business community involvement and economic potential through passenger rail as many other places do as much, if not more.
Thank you. They've been forwarding me articles that have been being written in the newspapers about this throughout the whole region over there. I think I've been in the newspaper more out there than here. So I think a very key point that we want to emphasize is, as Derrick said, one of the concerns in our community is, do we have enough ridership to have frequent rail service? And I really like what Derrick said. We've got it all wrong. We've been looking at it wrong. We don't wait for people to ride the rail in order to put more trains on there. It's an if you build it, they will come. We put the trains there, and that the frequency is what drives the usage, the ridership. And that is very key for the people in our community who really would like to use this. As far as the financials go, one thing that I wanted to mention is property taxes. We all know we pay way too high property taxes. Why is that? Because people are leaving our community by the bucket loads. And one of the things that keeps people in a community is jobs, and it draws people to a community. Also, access to transportation. When a major corporation wants to relocate to a community, they do a site survey, and one of the main things that they look at is access to transportation. Not having passenger rail, whether that company would use it or not having passenger rail hurts us tremendously. Derrick told me about the pellet factory. Is it Macomb?
Macomb.
In Macomb, a little teeny tiny town. Pella chose to relocate and build a factory in Macomb that employs tons of people in that community, and that community is growing because of that factory, because they built an Amtrak station in Macomb. So I think that that is something that is extremely important for us to consider, because, you know, that is a direct, you know, problem that our community faces.
What the company considers is that their local executives and spouses or whatever will have easier access to the business services in Chicago and Macomb than if they were, say, in Jacksonville. Again, having the rail is just another feather in the cap of the community that gives you sort of a leg up in terms of promoting themselves in terms of corporate relocations. One more thing, Western Illinois University, which is in Macomb, will tell you that again, before 2008, there was just an evening train out of Chicago to Quincy, and then in the morning it went back to Chicago, similar to what the Blackhawk did. When the state worked with us and added a second train so that there were morning and afternoon departures so that you could like do a day of business at either end and get back the same day. Ridership doubled on the route. Western Illinois University will tell you that the number of parking spots that they needed for students dropped by 40%, because now students didn't have to bring a car to campus since there were so many more train options available to them. And so that was a reduction in the need that the university had to provide places for students to leave their car sitting all semester just so they could get to and from campus. So a real financial benefit to having better rail.
So financials as well, I'd like to ask Derrick to talk a little bit about self-sustainability with Amtrak. That's a big concern. How much is this going to cost us with getting Amtrak service?
Sure. The state of Illinois, the Amtrak contract for the state of Illinois is $47 million a year. And that is for, and we spend more than 100, we spend,
Yes,
how much do we spend in terms of procurement in the state of
I'll
Illinois?
get that number for you.
And then how much is in terms of wages?
Yes, I'll get
Oh, thank you, Marc. So I'm sure it's quintuple what the state is investing in terms of the employees' wages and salary, and in terms of the procurement, all the things that we buy to actually run the system in the state of Illinois. Not to mention the contribution that just the presence of rail makes, provides for those communities because it's there.
Thank you. So there are a number of other things. One other thing is Amtrak being chartered by Congress as the national rail service for passengers. Amtrak only has to pay the owners of the tracks incrementally versus private companies like Metra. They can be charged much more of a rate, and they can be charged, even if they're using a little bit of track, they can be charged for using a lot of track even if they're not using it.
Yeah, Amtrak has right of access to all of the railroad network of the United States at incremental charge. What commuter railroad authorities have found when they're trying to expand is that commuter railroad authorities do not have that access and can be charged market rate by the host railroads to actually institute service on their line.
Amtrak spends $235 million a year in Illinois. Amtrak employees, including Derrick and myself, are somewhere inside a $92 million payroll. So if you add those, we are a very small part of it. Somewhere, then that means in excess of $300 million of Amtrak spending in Illinois for both wages and for procurement, versus the state's investment of a little less than $50 million. So the return on investment, if you will, of doing this is pretty high.
So, Derrick, a few years ago, Amtrak did do a study on the Dubuque-Chicago route. Will that study have to be upgraded, and how much will that take? What needs to be done for that? Does the state have to get behind that? Let's say you have to,
Absolutely.
environmental, whatever, all that stuff have to be all done over again?
Well, the study, we did a preliminary analysis of the route to determine what it would take to bring back one train.
Yeah.
So that study is, number one, it was probably 8-9 years ago, so it's out of date, it's stale, and it's not the model for service that we think is successful going forward.
So
One train back and forth a day is a novelty, that's not something that people can actually use.
So we need to get a study done, right?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that can be happening concurrently. Yes, an analysis of what work needs to be done, but there are things that the state could start doing now, which we know will need to be done, like engineering a connecting track in Elgin, so that you can get between two railroads. That'll make it easier to get here, depending on what route you use. Were there some other things? Was that the biggie?
It was engineering and land acquisition to
Right.
be done probably with direction this year. The ridership data in that study from 8 years ago is probably obsolete now. And it was also based on traffic assumptions that the CN and UP had on what their traffic was. Again, about 4 years ago in the case of the UP, about 8 years ago in the case of the CN. The UP route is the one that goes through Belvedere. The CN route is the one that goes directly to Rockford. And when we did that, CN was projecting there'd be ethanol plants and ethanol, alcohol traveling up and down the railroad multiple times a day. But if you live here in Rockford, you know how often you see a train on those tracks. It wasn't anything like what some of the projections were, but things change, so we'd have to update that information.
So you think that there's more demand now than there was 10 years ago?
Do I think there's more freight traffic
Or
on?
there's more demand for passenger train today?
Yes, because,
And how do we know that? How do we get the data for that improvement?
well, we have experience around the country in doing that, and we outsource it, so we can't be accused of putting our thumb on the scale. So that would have to be done, but that would drive some of the financial costs about how many people are gonna ride, how much would they be paying in tickets, how expensive would it be to operate. That's all doable information, but the way it works is IDOT or maybe the Metropolitan Planning Organization or someone else like that would come to us and ask for it.
Okay.
And there's a cost to get the work done, but versus this investment and this return, it's a pretty low.
Real quick, I would like to make mention of one thing, he mentioned the word land acquisition, but I also want to say that this is using existing rails. We are not going to be doing like the GLB where we're, declaring eminent domain and taking away family farms or cutting them in half. That is absolutely not what this is about. This is existing rail, upgrading the rails. We might have to build a second rail alongside one to get trains around each other so, freight trains don't interfere with the passengers or whatever. But we're not talking about like what the GLB was doing, where we're gonna just be annexing family farms that have been in the
This would be
family
the existing
years.
railroad footprint.
Right, exactly. Okay,
Yeah, and I don't wanna get off on a tangent about this, but I wanna follow up with one thing that David mentioned. The more I look at the Amtrak data, whatever's available to the public, okay, especially in regard to this last report about the projected ridership on this route, I could not figure out whether you factored in, for example, did you factor in all the universities and colleges, the enrollment in Dubuque? 2, did you factor in the potential ridership from UW-Platteville? Did you factor in the Rockford College potential ridership? Because the more I study these routes, all the state-sponsored routes, with a few exceptions, the platform of the ridership looks like the university college population.
Goes back to
Without that
staff and students.
foundation, you've got a problem.
Faculty, staff, and students. If you go to, our people who look at that map and try to guess what is the busiest Amtrak station outside of Chicago, don't always pick the right one, which is Bloomington Normal. We have more ridership in Bloomington Normal because we have 5 trains each way every day than we do in Champaign, which only has 3. We carry more passengers at the Springfield Amtrak station today where Derrick boarded than they do at the Capitol Airport in Springfield. So it's driven by frequency more than anything else. We can go look back at the old studies if you want, but they're really obsolete now. They really are obsolete.
Okay, let me make one last point. If it's possible, another meeting should happen here within a month. You come in with a case study of a state-sponsored route that looks like it's working the most effectively, that's costing the state the least amount of money.
That's Chicago to Milwaukee.
Yeah, but that's heavily subsidized by the state of Wisconsin.
No, it's not heavily subsidized. How heavy do you think it is?
Well, the Amtrak study I saw, Wisconsin was paying 90% of the operating cost.
No, the public is paying 90% of it. See, the agreement between Illinois and Wisconsin is, since the majority of the need, the majority of the desire for the services by the state of Wisconsin, Wisconsin pays 75% of the operating subsidy, Illinois pays 25%. You have to first consider how much fare people are paying. The customers are paying well more than the majority of the operating costs on that route. The states are only covering the difference.
But the state's still,
Oh, the state's still
Covering
subsidizing it?
75%, yeah.
No, the state is not covering 75% of the cost.
it's subsidizing 75%.
No,
After the fare box.
Oh, after the fare box. The
Yeah,
fare box is
yeah.
what covers the most of the cost of the service. What customers pay. It is only the difference between the operating cost and what customers pay that the state is subsidizing. And that's probably, I don't know what the operating ratio is on the Hiawatha's. Isn't it something like 75%?
But it's hard to make a Hiawatha analogy here,
It is.
but it's The Rail
And let's not
Passenger,
get off on this
the Rail
tangent. because
Passenger
there's other questions.
Association, which is the Rail Passenger Association, which is the lobbying group for rail passengers, just this week produced a study on the impact of our train, the Southwest Chief, which goes through, in this case, the concern was Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. In the appendix to that study are all the studies done across the country on the economic impact of this kind of service, and I'm happy to connect you with that information.
So bringing this down to, you know, things that people like me can understand. Of the portion that the government pays to have this service, the majority of it is paid by ridership, which, by the way, is not gonna be what some people are saying. There was some reports of $75 a ticket. It's not gonna be that much, not anywhere near that much to get from here to Chicago. That is something that people who don't want the train have put out there. Anyways, but of the portion that the government pays to help this service happen, 75% of that little chunk comes from Wisconsin, 25% comes from Illinois, on the line that goes to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So that's the, you know, translation that people like me can understand.
What we find is that, again, frequency drives success. The more frequency you have, the more folks you are riding, the less you have to subsidize the train. The subsidy per passenger goes down as you add more service because you're adding so many more passengers, and you are especially adding business class and business consumers who buy at the last minute and are paying the higher fare. If we consider our operating ratio, if you will, for Amtrak nationally, is somewhere, is it in the mid-90s? About where are we now?
Most of the cost of operating Amtrak comes from Amtrak originated funds, whether it's contracts with states or with the fare box, that is, people buying tickets. You showed the graph earlier where our federal operating support is now less than 10 cents on the dollar. But that's in part because of these contracts with states to run service, because these states decided they want to give people an option. Did anyone ask anyone in Rockford, when Governor Thompson built I-39, what the return on that investment was? No. The question was, does Rockford need a 4-lane road to the south? And the answer was, yeah, it does. And it's been a big benefit for everybody from here to Bloomington North.
Yeah, and
Instead of talking about costs all the time, we should be talking about investments and mobility and making the community more attractive. I lived for 10 years in DeKalb and Rockford, when I worked in public radio here, way back when. And thanks to you folks in Dubuque, by the way, to answering those editorials, those bad editorials in your Dubuque paper too. Any media still here? I'm very tired of hearing people bash Rockford wherever I go. And the more good things we can do in Rockford, or Belvedere, or Freeport, or Lena even, the better it is for all of us. I mean, aren't we all supposed to be in this together? So
you're paying taxes right now to support service on all these other routes. These are state tax dollars. So Rockford, one of the largest cities in Illinois, is not connected with the rail network.
We
A
need to bring
program
the
that the
tax
state,
dollars home.
yeah, why not? Why should you pay for everybody else's and you not have quality service that makes your city an even more pleasant place to live?
And we have so many beautiful things here, so many festivals, all that. They can add extra trains for the special events that we have going on here. So we had this gentleman here, then we had that lady, then we've got that gentleman back there. So
Okay. I've heard all these cuts. I know earlier you said Amtrak says the future growth is corridor trains, but I know I've been keeping tabs on this, but the current management board of directors of Amtrak seem to want to get rid of the long distance trains altogether. But the thing is, if the long distance trains disappear, the corridors will not have the ridership feeding into them from inter-region.
we could have that discussion about the nature of the long distance network. And I don't believe it's a fair characterization of our management, but let me tell you this. The state of Illinois, the state of Wisconsin, the state of Michigan, the state of Missouri is going to take delivery in the next year and a half of these new rail cars. The ones that were going to be built in Rochelle until that deal fell apart because they couldn't build them correctly. That means all of these trains we're running now will have equipment that's going to be going somewhere else. So the question is, do you want trains here, or do you want other states to pick up some of that service? We can't add trains fast enough in California. We can't add trains fast enough in Virginia. So there's demand and a shortage of equipment nationally of modern rail equipment. So do you want, now that you have a change in Washington on one side, a change in Springfield, to take another look at this? That's all we're saying. Let's take another look at this and see what can be done. And old studies and 1981 service is not the model we're talking about.
I know, speaking of equipment, I know that those 2 Calgo train sets that Wisconsin refused to take delivery on several years ago. I think those would be great for the Blackhawk when it's extended to Dubuque. You know why? Because the track in Joe Davies County snakes its way through.
It's curvy and the windows are big. Yeah, that equipment is sitting, waiting for someone to buy it.
Well, I figured that the train would be perfect for that, because they could handle this curves better.
I'd like to be in a point to talk about equipment, but I'd like to first get,
Let's get this,
So
get to
thank you
that
so
point.
much for that. We have this lady.
I'm Nancy from Huntley, and we're excited in Huntley for the idea of this for people going to Chicago. And also, there's in Huntley, we live in a 55 and over community, and there's a lot of people in Del Webb, and a lot of people, I bet, would love to go to Dubuque and Galena on the train, instead of driving there. But the other thing that nobody's mentioned yet is I believe that rail service is way better for the environment and less wear and tear on the highways. So that's another advantage,
Right, saving tax dollars there,
Yeah.
exactly.
Please let your legislators know how you feel.
Right. And coincidentally, the Northeast corridor that Derrick spoke of earlier, when they implemented that Northeast corridor, their economy just absolutely exploded. It grew by leaps and bounds. And there is a study by the Brookings Institute that talks about that and how wonderful it was for them. There's also, if you look it up, I'll post the article later on Train IL on the Facebook page. But in Charlotte, they actually noticed, or the data shows there was a drop in crime when the train came in. And they're saying that, yes, the train did affect that. So we had another question from a gentleman back there.
So just for giggles, you mentioned the Hiawatha is your popular one that's subsidized mostly by the fare box and not by the states. We're looking at a $25 one-way cheapest ticket for tomorrow. So it's $50 round trip. Do you see anybody using that as this route as a commuter?
a lot of people,
Especially with those kind of dollar figures?
on the Hiawatha route, almost a third of the people who are riding it are riding on 10 ride tickets
Okay.
that expire in 60 days, or monthly tickets. I have a reason to ride the Hiawatha route a couple times a week, and you talk to the conductors, they see the same people riding every day, or most days of the week. When Miller Coors, when they closed the offices for Miller in Milwaukee, they put them in Chicago just across the river from our station. Johnson, SC Johnson Company has moved parts of its operation from Racine down to Chicago. There's lots of very frequent ridership on that.
So a 10 ride ticket costs how much?
I can pull it up. I
mean,
don't live in Wisconsin, and I don't use it that often to buy it, but there's lots of regular riders there. And it really doesn't, there are people who say that it only be used for tourism, or there's people who say it only be used for fun. When you drive down I-90, are you asking people why they're using I-90? They're using it. So whether they're using it daily, or using it weekly, or using it monthly, 830,000 people used that last year, an all-time record.
And I know there is definitely a need because obviously we have buses that go from Rockford to Chicago that are part of the Amtrak package as well.
I'm riding one tomorrow.
But that being said, that's still $25, and that's typically somebody that's doing a vacation or something where they're going to fly to O'Hare and then out somewhere.
I think the Van Gelderman ticket for me tomorrow is 21 from here to Union Station.
Right. So we're talking about the same amount of time, plus you have to be, if you're going during rush hour, you have to be in stop and go rush hour traffic, and it could, so the goal is to get you from Rockford to Chicago in under an hour and a half at any time, even during rush hour. So, and then the other thing is that, you know, when did you look that rate up? Today, right now?
Right in this meeting.
Yeah, that's a fair, he's right.
Right,
25 is
so,
about it,
but
yeah.
if you purchase in advance, then would it be slower?
Nope,
No,
that's
it
fair.
If
would-
you buy the
okay.
monthly or 10 ride,
Here's the key,
Okay, there you go.
we dynamically price, so we will dynamically price and for the state supported services in conjunction with what the state's philosophy is. Wisconsin wants to derive as much money as possible from the fare box to reduce their operating subsidy. Illinois has a slightly different philosophy. Illinois views the train as a critical transportation tool for their citizenry, so they want to keep the fares low. We end up paying a little bit more in subsidy, but Illinois thinks it's important that college students be able to have an affordable way to get to and from college. What's the lowest fare to get to Springfield from Chicago? Which is 180 miles? $19.
Right,
So
Okay, any
people buy,
other-
the lobbyists that I see on the train, there's a 457 train out of Springfield every day going back to Chicago. I call it the lobbyist train. They've got their 10-ride tickets, which are $190. They're like, I can't beat this with a stick.
Yeah.
$19 to go 180 miles from Springfield to Chicago.
all right, we
That's
have
why I
it,
asked only just because I saw that rate, I'm thinking, wait a minute, that seems a bit high for a commuter level, at least from this area.
Well, I don't know what it is from Harvard on Metro either, but
It's about $10.
yeah.
So like 20%.
I took it like last,
Versus
or in
50.
December, the end of December, and it was like $9.80 or something like that.
on the weekend or a weekday?
That was during the day, yeah. So, we have a question here and a question there.
There's been rumors that,
Uh-oh, rumors.
that's what we want you to clarify. That's all I was in here for, that Canadian National was not very receptive to Amtrak.
None of them
Can you
are.
repeat the question?
He asked if Canadian National is one of the railroads that connects Chicago to Rockford. Again, most of our routes run on the private freight railroad network at incremental cost. And he asked if CN was or was not receptive to Amtrak. They all have to work with us. So yeah, they're not prone to wanting to give up access to their main line, but they are corporate citizens in the U.S. and part of their responsibility is to provide space for Amtrak trains. So
And we want to take this through Belvedere anyways, which is Union Pacific.
I am silent on that.
Belvedere, Belvedere. I insist. Okay, we have a question. Oh, by the way, I wanted to acknowledge Terry. He's a member of like a historian group that is very knowledgeable about trains. These people can tell you where any train that ever existed in this entire region is. They're very knowledgeable, and they're very excited about this as well.
Well, to complete his point though, CN and UP, it's been 4 years since either one has been asked about putting trains over here.
And one of the UP logistical people came to my Boone County Fair booth because he heard about what I was doing, and he was super excited. So I don't know that he's the person who is the decision maker, but he is the one that routes all the freight trains, and he was very excited. We have a question here.
I just spent 3 weeks over at the Nicholas Conservatory in conjunction with their garden train from the LMRA. We had I had my layout, the old scale layout, and then we had the history with Clarence there. During the period between the 26th and the 1st of the
Also
year.
a train historian here too.
Yeah. We noted that the majority of people coming to see this were coming out of Chicago and Galesburg. And I couldn't figure out why, so I asked them, and they said, well, the Chicago Tribune had a big write-up about the Nicholas Conservatory and the model railroads that we had there. Now, the NMRA has been working with the Park District, providing this model railroad trend. And we've done 8 shows this year, and our attendance has been going up. But we also provide it free to these organizations, which is a draw-in. Now, it seems to me that if we're getting people out of Chicago coming here to see our stuff, rather than us going to Chicago to see their stuff, I would think that people from Chicago would want to see this Amtrak. I know the
Right.
people from Galesburg wanted to see it come all the way into Rockford, because they had to get out of Dakota, and somebody had to pick them up and drive the other 30 miles here.
There, real quick,
Okay,
I'd
yeah,
like to say something. So yeah, yesterday at the inauguration, all I did was tell somebody I was from Rockford, and he started talking about this train. And this is somebody that was from Chicago. Yes, they know about this. We have so many exciting things in Rockford. We need to be bringing dollars from outside of our community to our community. This will drive tourism to our community like crazy. We will be bringing dollars that we are currently not eligible for or we're missing out on into our community. Also, higher wage earners that are working in Chicago who would love to live out here